ACLU website. He did that after reading the even more atrocious CIA Inspector General report, dated April 2004, shown to members of the intelligence committees, but never released until April 16th, I think it was, 2009. I'm sorry, no, it was August 24th, 2009. April was the DOJ memos. He is accurately reported as having been sickened by what he read in the CIA IG report. And so he decided that he would broaden the investigation. There's this special prosecutor, this government prosecutor, John Durham, who's been looking into the destruction of CIA tapes for a year and a half now. Okay, and so he's instructed Durham to broaden this investigation into the misdeeds of CIA employees who exceeded even the very elastic guidelines of that corrupt Justice Department copy of lawyers. What does that mean? Well, these are the guys that kind of outdid themselves. They interrogated Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 183 times instead of, let's say, the 165 times authorized by the Department of Justice. Can you believe it? They kept some of these guys awake for 12 days instead of the 11-day limit. And so ostensibly, those are the guys that they're going after. But you know what's going to happen, folks? Remember where you heard it first. What's going to happen is this. These guys are not the poor Lindy Englands of this world. They're not the poor little slobs, the so-called rotten apples at the bottom of the barrel in Abu Ghraib. These guys are going to get lawyers, okay? And the lawyers are going to say, well, my client was told to do this by A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are going to get lawyers. And they're going to say, we were told this, and here's a memo, by D, E, and F. And by the time they get to L, M, and N, you know who it's going to be? It's going to be Rumsfeld, Tenet, Cheney, and the president. Now, remember where you heard it first. Nobody, I can't get too many people to buy into this optimistic view, but I think that this is a watershed. That just as in Watergate, some of you I see have as much grades as I have in my hair, will remember that they started with the small fry, didn't they? The small fry sang, and they got the president out of there. So there's some hope there. Now I want to go to some practical things here. I've, as usual, got too much to say, but maybe some of it will come out in your questions and so forth. I think the things that have to be said are, this torture work. Somehow or other, what I call the fawning corporate media. I won't go any further than that, but the acronym is FCM, and you use a hard C to pronounce it. These folks have diverted the conversation to a conversation about whether torture works, okay? They've already gotten below the moral implications of this. And so let's address just that, okay? Some of us believe torture is immoral, should never be done. Actually, the whole civilized world believed that in the wake of World War II, when these international agreements were written. I mean, torture is not wrong because it's illegal. It's illegal because it's wrong. And the whole civilized world recognized that, okay? So now let's just talk about, does it work? Well, anybody that's going to argue with you about that, I cite one supreme authority, and it's not just because I was an intelligence officer in the Army, but maybe it's partly because of that, because we had to memorize that interrogation manual when we were Army officers in the 60s. We had to know that pretty much by heart. What we could do, what we couldn't do, what we could say, what we taken prisoner, what we couldn't say, what kind of treatment we could expect from the people who captured us, okay, or what we could demand under international law. General John Kimmons, gutsy Army intelligence general, actually the head of all Army intelligence in this country, I'll tell you what he did. He learned that President Bush was going to have a press conference on September 6, 2006, at which he was going to advertise the merits and the successes of enhanced interrogation techniques. He called it an alternative set of procedures. And it really gets tough. It's, but it really works, okay? Now, when Kemmons learned that, guess what he did? He called his own press conference for 3 hours before at the Pentagon, right across the river from the White House. And this is what he said. No good intelligence has ever come from abusive interrogation techniques. History shows that, and the empirical evidence of the past 5 years, comma, hard years, comma, also demonstrates that, period, end quote. Now, I suggest to you that if you have a choice between believing the testimony of the head of Army Intelligence with 30 years experience as an Army officer and 20 of those years in Army interrogation techniques, I'd take that any day over the word of a president who was shown to have a penchant and not tell the truth. So that I think, look that up and use that if people say, well, it works. It doesn't work. The other thing I'll say is that this is really important to say, because in a sense it can be made to work. When Kemmons says, and others believe, as I do, that you can't get reliable information from torture. But guess what you can get? Anyhow.
What you want.
Yeah, you can get unreliable information, can't you? And man, that torture really works. It works like a charm. And so when we captured this Eatman al-Sheikh al-Libi, and we gave him to the Egyptians, and we said, we think he knows about Saddam Hussein training 2 al-Qaeda operatives in chemical and biological weapons, but he won't tell us. See what you guys can do. That's called extraordinary rendition, folks. Well, surprise, surprise, the Egyptians got him to say that. The President of the United States used that in his speeches. Secretary Powell at the UN used that. Even though the Defense Intelligence Agency had already ruled this guy out as an unreliable reporter because some of the stuff he was reporting just didn't parse, okay? And after all this, al-Libi himself recanted. And he said, he said this because they needed him to stop torturing the Egyptians. So what happened to al-Libi? Anybody know? Well, it was deemed politically incorrect, at the very least, that he should be speaking out like this. So he's given back to the Libyans. Put him in a Libyan prison, and surprise, surprise, he committed suicide about 4 months ago. Now, it really was a surprise because he was a devout Muslim, and Muslims don't commit suicide. It's also a surprise when he was given back to his family members. I don't know exactly what they found, but when other family members have received similar suicides from Libyan prisons, they've been really, really interested in how much damage a prisoner could do to the back of his head, and the back of his back, and that kind of thing. So that's the end of the story. The point is, if you want unreliable information, if you want false information to, let's say, maybe justify a war against Iraq, then you can do that if you torture people. And that was one of the main reasons for torture. We know that. We know that from a doctor who was seconded to Guantanamo and reported in the report from the Senate committee that the main objective down in Guantanamo, mind you, was to get proof that Saddam Hussein was orchestrating al-Qaeda, or at least had significant ties with it. That was one of the questions I asked Rumsfeld during my 4 minutes of glory 4 years ago. And of course, he denied having said that the intelligence was, airtight, that there were links between the two. The other thing I'll say is it's kind of a more specific example, and that is, I was speaking out in Palo Alto with a Army sergeant, Williams was his name, and he was a 16-year veteran of the Army, and he had trained people in the Army approach to interrogations. And when asked about these extraordinary